welcome to our podcast. I'm Sophia, and this is my co-host, James.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We're really excited to talk about something important, making mistakes while learning English and why that's not a bad thing.
Default text. That's right. Many people feel embarrassed or even scared to make mistakes when they're learning a language. But you know what? Mistakes are a natural and important part of learning.
Exactly. Let's think about it for a moment. Have you ever watched a baby learn to walk? What do?
Oh, they fall so many times, but do they give up? No, they just keep trying, and eventually they learn to walk.
And learning English or any language is the same. You're going to stumble and fall sometimes, but every mistake you make is like taking another step forward.
So today, we're going to talk about some useful words and phrases related to mistakes and learning, and how you can use them to improve your English. Let's start with the word mistake.
A mistake is something you do that's not correct. For example, if you say, he go to the store instead of he goes to the store, that's a mistake.
But here's the important thing. Instead of feeling bad about it, think of a mistake as a chance to learn. If you know it's wrong, you can fix it next time.
That's such a great point. Another useful word is error. Now, error is very similar to mistake, but it's often used in more formal situations. For example, you might see it in school or work, like there was an error in the report.
Good one, James. And there's another phrase I love, trial and error. Do you know what that means?
Yes, it's when you try something, make mistakes, and then try again. You keep learning from the errors until you get it right. It's such a positive way to think about learning.
Exactly. And here's a great expression. Learn from your mistakes. This means that every time you make a mistake, you find out what went wrong and try to do better next time.
Let's give an example. Imagine you're learning how to say the days of the week in English. If you say Saturday instead of Saturday, that's okay. You've learned something, and now you'll remember it's Saturday.
That's a great example. Now, let's talk about how to deal with mistakes. One really important thing to do is to stay positive.
Oh, absolutely. If you get upset or frustrated, it can make learning harder. Instead, try saying to yourself, it's okay to make mistakes. I'm learning.
And don't forget about the phrase practice makes perfect. It means the more you practice, the better you'll get even if you make a lot of mistakes along the way.
Yes, and here's another one. Nobody's perfect. Even native English speakers make mistakes sometimes, right?
Definitely. I mean, how many times have you written a text message and realized you spelled something wrong? It happens to everyone.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to be kind to yourself. Making mistakes doesn't mean you're bad at English, it means you're trying. And that's what really matters.
You know, James, I think we should remind everyone about one more thing. Don't be afraid to ask for help.
That's such good advice. If you don't know how to say something, ask a teacher, a friend, or even use a dictionary. People are usually happy to help you learn.
So true. And remember, every time you ask a question, you're learning something new.
Absolutely. All right, we've talked about mistakes, errors, trial and error, and so much more already. There's a lot to think about, isn't there?
Definitely, and we'll keep exploring this topic in more detail, so stick with us. Let's keep learning and growing together.
All right, let's keep going. So, Sophia, earlier we talked about making mistakes and learning from them. But I think it's also important to talk about why people are so scared of making mistakes, especially when they're learning English.
Oh, that's such a great point, James. I think one big reason is fear of being judged. People worrying that if they say something wrong, others will laugh or think they're not smart.
Yes, I hear that all the time, but here's something to remember. Most people aren't going to judge you. In fact, they'll often admire you for trying to speak a new language.
Exactly. And I think it's helpful to know a few phrases you can use when you're speaking and feeling sure. For example, you can say, I'm sorry, I'm still learning. That shows you're trying, and most people will understand.
That's a really good one. Another phrase is, could you help me with this? It's such a simple way to ask for support if you're stuck on a word or phrase.
I love that. And here's another one. How do you say this in English? This is super useful when you want to explain something but don't know the right word.
Yes, and it's okay to make mistakes while using these phrases too. The important thing is to keep communicating. You might not say something perfectly, but people will usually understand what you mean.
Exactly. And you know what? Making mistakes can actually make conversations more interesting. Imagine this. You say something wrong, and the other person helps you. Now you're not just speaking, you're connecting with someone and learning at the same time.
That's so true. Let's talk about some practical ways to get more comfortable making mistakes. One idea is to practice with someone you trust, like a friend, a family member, or even a language partner.
Definitely, when you're with someone you trust, you can feel more relaxed and less worried about being perfect. And here's a phrase you can use with a friend. Let me know if I say something wrong. That way, they can gently correct you if needed.
That's a great idea. Another tip is to practice in private first. For example, you can talk to yourself in English when you're at home.
Oh, I do that all the time when I'm learning a new language. It's a great way to build confidence. You can look in the mirror and say things like, "Today is a good day," or "I'm going to the store."
Exactly. And don't forget about listening. When you listen to English songs, podcasts, or TV shows, you can hear how words and phrases are used. Even if you don't understand everything, you're still learning.
That's a good point, James. And if you hear a word you don't know, don't be afraid to stop and look it up. You can even try saying it out loud to practice.
Yes, and when you're learning new words, mistakes can actually help you remember them. For example, if you confuse kitchen and chicken one time, you'll probably laugh and never forget the difference.
Oh, that's a good one. And laughter is so important. If you can laugh at your mistakes, it takes away the fear and makes learning more fun.
Absolutely. Now, let's talk about another way to improve: writing. Writing in English can feel a little scary at first, but it's a great way to practice.
I agree. And here's a tip. Don't worry about spelling or grammar too much when you're writing for practice. Just focus on getting your ideas down.
Yes, exactly. You can even start by writing a diary or journal in English. For example, you could write, "Today, I went to the park. The weather was nice." It doesn't have to be long or complicated.
That's such a good idea. And if you're not sure about a word, you can look it up or ask someone. Over time, you get better and more confident.
Another way to practice is to write comments online. For example, you can leave a comment on a YouTube video or a social media post. It's a fun way to use English in real life. Absolutely. All right, we've talked about mistakes, errors, trial and error, and so much more already. There's a lot to think about, isn't there? Yes, and there's no rush. Learning takes time, and every little bit of practice helps.
Speaking of practice, let's not forget about one of the best ways to learn: listening to conversations like this one.
That's right. We're here to help you learn, and we're so glad you're joining us on this journey. Let's keep building your confidence and skills one step at a time.
All right, let's keep the conversation going. James, earlier, we talked about the fear of making mistakes and how to overcome it. But I think it's also important to discuss how mistakes can actually help us improve faster.
That's such a good point, Sophia. Mistakes are like little teachers. Every time you make one, it's an opportunity to learn something new.
Exactly. Let's talk about some common mistakes people make when learning English. One of the most common is using the wrong verb tense. For example, saying, "I eat breakfast yesterday" instead of "I ate breakfast yesterday."
Oh, yes. Verb tenses can be tricky, especially because English has so many of them. But here's the thing. When you make a mistake like that, you're actually learning how the language works.
Right. And once someone corrects you or you notice the mistake, you're more likely to remember it next time. It's like your brain is saying, "Oh, I see what I did there. I'll try it differently next time."
That's so true. Another common mistake is confusing words that sound similar. For example, there, and there.
Oh, yes. Those words confuse even native speakers sometimes. But the more you practice, the easier it gets to understand the difference.
Exactly. And here's something interesting. When you notice these kinds of mistakes, it means you're paying attention. That's a really good thing because it shows you're trying to understand the language deeply.
Absolutely. Another common mistake is pronunciation. For example, some people say tree instead of three, but guess what? Even if your pronunciation isn't perfect, most people will still understand you.
That's such an important point. Communication is the goal, not perfection. If someone understands what you're saying, then you're already succeeding.
Exactly. And here's a tip for improving pronunciation. Listen carefully to how native speakers say words and try to copy them. You can use apps, watch videos, or even sing along to songs.
Oh, singing is a great way to practice. It's fun, and it helps you get used to the rhythm and sounds of English.
Definitely. And don't forget about the phrase practice makes progress. Notice I didn't say perfect. That's because nobody is perfect, and that's okay.
That's such a good reminder. Learning English or anything takes time, and it's all about getting better step by step.
Exactly. Now, let's talk about another way to use mistakes as a learning tool. Self-correction.
Oh, that's a good one. Self-correction means noticing your own mistakes and fixing them. For example, if you say, "She don't like coffee," and then you think, "Wait, that's not right. It should be she doesn't like coffee." That's self-correction.
Right. And self-correction shows that you're learning because you're starting to understand the rules of English.
Yes, and it's a great habit to develop. One way to practice self-correction is to record yourself speaking.
That's a fantastic idea. You can listen to the recording and notice anything that sounds off. For example, maybe you left out a word or used the wrong form of a verb.
Exactly. And don't be too hard on yourself when you listen. Remember, the goal is to learn, not to be perfect.
That's so important. And speaking of not being too hard on yourself, let's talk about mindset. Having a positive mindset can make such a big difference when you're learning English.
Oh, absolutely. If you believe in yourself and stay positive, it's easier to keep going even when you make mistakes.
Exactly. And here's a phrase that I think is really helpful. I can do this. It's such a simple thing to say, but it can give you the confidence to keep trying.
That's a great one, and I have another phrase. Every day, I'm getting better. Even if you only learn one new word or improve a little bit, that's progress.
I love that. Learning a language is like building a house. Every mistake is like a brick. It helps you build something stronger.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And remember, no one learns a language overnight. It's a journey, and every step you take brings you closer to your goal.
Exactly. And if you ever feel discouraged, just think about how far you've already come. Even if you only know a few words in English, that's more than you knew yesterday.
That's so true. And let's not forget, mistakes aren't just for beginners. Even advanced learners make mistakes sometimes.
Yes, and that's a great reminder that learning never really ends. There's always something new to discover, and that's what makes it so exciting.
Absolutely. So whether you're just starting out or you've been learning English for a while, embrace your mistakes. They're helping you grow.
That's such a great way to look at it. And remember, you're not alone. Everyone makes mistakes, and everyone has the ability to learn and improve.
Exactly. Let's keep that positive energy going as we continue exploring ways to learn and grow.
All right, let's dive back in. James, we've talked so much about making mistakes, learning from them, and staying positive. But I think it's also really important to talk about how to practice consistently, even when life gets busy.
That's a great point, Sophia. Consistency is key when learning a language. It's not about doing everything perfectly. It's about practicing a little every day.
Exactly. One thing I always recommend is setting small, realistic goals. For example, instead of saying, "I'm going to learn 100 new words this week," you could say, "I'll learn 5 new words today."
Yes, small goals are much easier to stick to. And here's a tip. Try to connect your learning to things you already do. For example, if you like cooking, you could learn the names of ingredients and cooking tools in English.
That's such a good idea. You could even watch a cooking video in English and follow along. It's a fun way to learn new words and phrases.
Definitely. And if you're someone who likes music, listen to English songs. Try to sing along and learn the lyrics. It's not just fun, it helps with pronunciation and vocabulary too.
Absolutely. And speaking of fun, let's talk about using games to practice English. There are so many apps and online games that can help you learn while having a good time.
Oh, yes. And you can even play simple games like word matching or guessing games with a friend. For example, one person says a word, and the other has to say a word that starts with the last letter.
That's a great one, and it works for all levels. Even if you only know a few words, you can still play and learn.
Exactly. Now, Sophia, let's talk about one of the biggest challenges people face when learning English: staying motivated. What do you think helps the most?
For me, it's all about remembering why you started. Ask yourself, why do I want to learn English? Maybe it's for a job, to travel, or just to connect with more people. Keeping that goal in mind can really help.
That's so true, and it's also helpful to celebrate your progress, no matter how small it seems. For example, if you have your first conversation in English, even if it's short, that's a huge step.
Yes, celebrate every success. You could even keep a journal and write down things like, today, I learned how to say the months in English, or I had a 5-minute conversation with someone in English.
That's a great idea, and here's another way to stay motivated. Find a community. There are so many online groups and forums where people are learning English together.
That's such a good tip. When you're part of a group, you can share your experiences, ask questions, and encourage each other. It makes learning less lonely.
Exactly. And speaking of community, practicing with native speakers is a great way to improve. Even if you only know a little English, most native speakers are happy to help.
That's so true. And if you don't have access to native speakers, you can use apps or websites to find language partners. It's a great way to practice and learn about other cultures too.
Yes, and here's something important to remember. When you're practicing with someone, it's okay to make mistakes. In fact, making mistakes shows that you're trying.
Absolutely. And the more you try, the more confident you'll become. Confidence is such a big part of learning a language.
That's a great point, Sophia. Confidence grows over time, and it starts with taking small steps. For example, you could practice ordering food in English at a restaurant or asking for directions.
Yes, real-life practice is so valuable. And don't be afraid to say, I'm still learning English. Can you speak slowly? Most people will be happy to help.
That's a great phrase to remember. And another tip for building confidence is to focus on what you can do, not what you can't do yet.
Exactly. Instead of thinking, I still make mistakes, try saying, I'm learning something new every day. It's all about changing how you see your progress.
That's such a good mindset. And remember, learning English is a journey, not a race. It's okay to go at your own pace.
Yes, and don't forget to enjoy the process. Learning a language opens up so many opportunities to connect with people and experience new things.
That's so true. And you know what? Everyone listening to this podcast is already doing something amazing by taking the time to learn and practice.
Absolutely. We're so proud of all of you for taking this step and working to improve your English. Just remember, every mistake you make is helping you grow.
That's right. So keep practicing, keep learning, and keep believing in yourself. You've got this.
And with that, it's time for us to wrap up. Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you found this conversation helpful and inspiring.
Yes, and don't forget to share this podcast with your friends and family who are also learning English.
And make sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss future episodes. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.